Hey everyone, welcome to the start of a new type of video called The Long One. In this series, I'm just gonna sit down and talk about anything I feel like can't be covered in a regular video. This can be due to length or lack of footage, but I think length is the key factor here. It will be like a scripted rant, so to say, but it's a new form of content I can offer to all of you while I focus on larger projects. If any of you have ever seen Curbifer's Curb blogs, this series is heavily inspired by that, so go check them out. A link to his channel is in the description. Anyway, today's subject is a little movie you might have heard of, Avengers Infinity War, and just like that, I'm slapping the spoiler warning on here, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, I'm going to urge you to leave this video and go see it. It's good, that's as far as I can go without, saying anything that'll have the tiniest hint of spoilers. By the way, wasn't it hilarious when the Russo brothers made the request to not say anything about the movie? They made a letter, and then Marvel made a video with the hashtag, what was it? Thanos demands your silence. I thought that was a cute effort on their part. You know, at first, I thought that was actually kind of possible. If some of the larger movie review channels and websites just didn't talk about the movie the mere second after release, that hashtag might have worked. All they needed was a 2-second black screen with white text that said one of these two phrases. It's good or it was bad. That's all we needed, but no, that didn't stop anyone. Everyone gave their thoughts on the movie, and even in the spoiler-free reviews, people still gave parts of the plot away, so some of the surprise factor is already gone for fans. Then it was the icing on the cake when some of those same reviewers said, "Oh, by the way, my spoiler-filled review will be up in a couple days because everyone on this freaking planet will have seen the movie by then, right? Right? Add that with the low resolution 30-second clips of the movie, and we got ourselves a full serving of horrific temptation and crushed Russo dreams." I just ruined that pun just by, trying to be witty. I guess before we actually dive into the film, I can explain where I started in Marvel's 10-year build-up to this movie. If you want to jump to certain parts in the video, I do have timestamps in the description. But anyway, I didn't get into Marvel movies until Captain America: The First Avenger. I didn't watch Iron Man then, and I didn't watch Thor. In fact, the first time I watched Thor was when I was in a bus on my way back to college from a band show. I didn't really pay attention to the movie. It was almost midnight, if I remember right, and I was just tired. I was like in that limbo between awake and asleep. I guess you could call Thor a bore. No one's ever made that joke before. Shoot me. But anyway, when I first saw Captain America, I was honestly a little bit inspired. Here's a guy that doesn't have any powers, he just wants to do the right thing, and all he has is a shield. His story was simple, there was some inspirational music in there, and it was an overall good time. That's when I thought that Marvel's lineup of films might be worth checking out. So I saw Iron Man, and then I saw Thor, that time I was awake, and was all geared up for the Avengers. I didn't give the Incredible Hulk a chance. To be honest, I don't think I can watch a solo movie about him because the Hulk works in short doses. I like the Jekyll and Hyde approach, but I don't think you can make a full-length feature film about him without being full of cliches. So now here comes the Avengers, and before that time I was a giant DC nerd. I grew up watching shows like Justice League, Static Shock, Teen Titans, Batman Beyond, which was a good time. But after I saw the first Avengers film, I was hooked on Marvel. To me, even though it had its problems, it worked like a comic book movie. In fact, it was the perfect comic book movie at the time. It was a true adaptation of the source material, just giving you fun and action. That's all we needed. I saw that movie 5 times in theaters, and each time I enjoyed it. In fact, I think one of my favorite moments in theater history was hearing everyone's separate reactions to Hulk smashing Loki into the ground. It was a collective burst of joy, one of those few things that all of humanity could band together and say, yeah, that's pretty awesome. So now the tables in terms of the fandom have turned. Marvel upped their game, but I was enjoying their other works as well. For example, their Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes cartoon, it's freaking amazing. I might just do like a Long One video video on that. I can't stress enough how good it is. And meanwhile, on DC's end, unless it was an animated or Lego film, their work took a decline in quality. Even though I can still enjoy them as the bad movies they are, that is what they are. I think the only DC movie that I didn't have a good time watching was Suicide Squad. For that theater experience, I remember my best friend Marshall, who was in my most recent video, the 1990s Captain America Riptouch, free promotion. Anyway, we were just sitting there, bored out of our skulls, and we take pleasure in having fun with bad movies. We're heavily inspired by Mystery Science Theater, but Suicide Squad was one of those movies where no enjoyment was had, other than that 2-second shot of the Enchantress flipping her hand over and then the woman turns into the Enchantress. That was the only cool part that I liked. Now I am working my way back to Marvel here because that same kind of criticism can be shared for some of their other movies. See, Marvel movies tended to follow a very familiar pattern. Show the hero, show the villain, who's usually an evil version of the hero, have the hero learn a lesson, big fight at the end, tease the next movie. However, the difference in quality here was that most of the time, at least there was effort put into these individual characters. Each one handled a situation differently and was attached to a different genre. Winter Soldier focused on a spy thriller, Thor focused on fantasy and then to sci-fi adventure, and Spider-Man had high school drama. I think the keys of this formula, though, were the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. They take this formula, apply it to 5 heroes, and then events unfold with a kick-ass song selection. The execution felt just right, and they're easily up there on my favorite comic book movies list. Hell, even my general favorite movies ever. I just love them that much. If I had to list the Marvel movies from least enjoyable to most enjoyable for me personally, Iron Man 2, Thor, Ant-Man, Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, Captain America the First Avenger, Doctor Strange, Iron Man, Captain America Civil War, Spider-Man Homecoming, The Avengers, Black Panther, Captain America Winter Soldier, Age of Ultron, Thor Ragnarok, Guardians 1 and 2, and then finally, Infinity War. Yes, I admit it, this movie is actually my favorite Marvel movie right now. I'll most likely make a long one video about this list, so stay tuned for that. But all in all, ever since 2011, I got hooked on Marvel's movies and wanted to be part of the journey to see where this would all go. Was there some repetition here and there? Absolutely. But I can still have fun watching these movies. So when those 2 Infinity War trailers hit, and everyone was making delicious ad revenue reacting to them, I sat there in excitement waiting for that end of April date. And then it came. I saw it twice so far, and I feel like I'm finally ready to talk about this movie. So I'll split this entire video into 3 parts: what I liked, what I didn't, and finally what I personally would change, which would then be followed by any closing remarks I have. So let's get started with what I liked. Right off the bat, I love the intro and the tone it presents. When the logo first appears, you don't hear the triumphant theme that showcases all the heroes. Oh no. You hear the desperate cries of the damned. The first visuals you see are a ship under attack with a large crowd of people on board dead on the ground. And then you have this speech that's like, "Don't worry, if you're dead, you just helped save the universe in our master's eyes. Rejoice in your untimely demise, for you are all his children." And then we see him, Thanos, standing triumphantly, holding a bleeding and battered Thor with an actually worried Loki watching. Loki throughout his life has lived on manipulation, always looking for a way out and to get ahead of everyone else. Here though, even though he still tries his tricks, he does them out of fear, not as part of a larger plan. He finally ran out of ways to get himself out of trouble. But then Loki recites an Avengers line, "We have a Hulk," and we all rejoice. Yeah, Hulk! Get him! Break that Titan in half! I bet he'll need his followers just to live! But no, that doesn't happen at all. Thanos instead, smiles and proceeds to utterly beat the crap out of the Hulk in a one-on-one fight. Just about every one of Hulk's fights in these movies has relied on throwing himself around and punching really, really hard. But here comes someone that does that just as well, but actually knows how to fight. It's embarrassing for the Jolly Green Giant, to say the least. And right when the Hulk loses, Loki tries to get in a sneak attack, but is caught red-handed. And like any good boss, Thanos lets his former employee go in a dignified way by grabbing his throat and smiles as Loki's eyes go red and falls to the ground lifeless. I think that it was at that moment that I knew that things just got real. It was the epiphany that this movie may actually go all out in a comic book adaptation that's known for characters being massacred. I mean, this was Loki. The character that's escaped death the most in this universe is one of the first to die in the movie. The message that doom is coming for everyone strikes home in the first few minutes. I love it. The scene ends with Thanos declaring victory as he leaves Thor to die on a ship about to explode. This leads to my next point that I like, Thor himself. Aside from Thanos, who I will get into later, Thor is the other star of the show. He goes on this quest to get justice for all those that Thanos has killed, but he knows that he needs a better weapon to do it. So he teams up with the now named, until he says otherwise, Rocket Rabbit and Groot to get said weapon. And during this quest, Thor makes us realize just how much pain he's been through for the past 10 years. He doesn't have someone he can love, his home was destroyed, his father is dead, his mother and brother were murdered, his friends were killed in the line of duty, and he knows that his team is next on the chopping block if he doesn't do something. He's the last line of defense for the universe, and there's a really good scene where Rocket confronts Thor about the upcoming battle. The latter believes that it is fate that Thor has survived, so he will triumph. However, if he's wrong, then the man has nothing left to lose. I swear, if I wasn't paying attention, I might have confused Thor with Samurai Jack in his final season. But once he goes through all the adversity, and by adversity I mean that once he survives taking a freaking star to the face, he returns to Earth with a new weapon and new armor. I think that's why his entrance is one of the more beloved scenes in the movie. His return signifies that Thor is back in his full glory. He's pushed beyond his pain and limits and stands as the Titan Killer. It doesn't hurt that he poses next to Rocket and Groot and quickly makes a crater out of some alien fodder. So I really loved how Thor was handled in this movie and was given the respect he so desperately deserves. I mean, ever since the first Thor movie, he's always been seen as a meh kind of character. Not bad, but not really interesting either. He showed signs of improving in Age of Ultron, but really took the helm in Thor Ragnarok. He surged in popularity, and for good reason. And while we're talking about a found in Avengers movie, I like how the film is divided into 4 main story arcs. We have the Thanos storyline as he's searching for the Infinity Stones, but the other 3 storylines each focus on the 3 main founders of the Avengers. We have a story arc with Captain America preparing to defend Earth and his friends. We have Thor, who, as mentioned before, is going to find a weapon to deal with Thanos. And then we have Iron Man, who, as the man who started this entire cinematic universe, is on a direct collision course with Thanos. Each of these 3 story arcs has something to offer to the audience, and each have their own brand of action. And that is another thing that I loved in this movie, the action. Each fight is memorable and has purpose. They each have their own stakes and are easy to watch and comprehend. We also get to see the full scope of the Black Order, which is Thanos' minions. We have Maw, who's easily my favorite thanks to his psychic mastery, I guess. I don't really know what kind of power it is, but it's still awesome. We have Corvus Glaive, who I actually remember from certain comics, so it was cool seeing him. There's his lover Midnight, who is basically an evil alien version of Black Widow, so yeah. And then there's what is his name? The big one. You know what? I don't know if the big alien with like the transforming acts if he had a name, so I'll just throw in a Team 4-star clip here to send the message.
And that would make you, no doubt, the big, tough, stupid one.
You take that back or I'll kill you!
All right, you're not tough.
That's better!
Wait, didn't you?
Give him a minute.
But yeah, each fight in this movie had weight and none felt unimportant. If I had to pick a favorite fight, it would be Iron Man, Star-Lord, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Drax, Mantis, and Nebula versus Thanos. This fight may be my favorite fight from Marvel yet. One of my concerns in this movie was that the Infinity Gauntlet was going to be nothing more than a power-up, something that made Thanos hit harder or could fire energy beams, really simplistic stuff. However, they took each stone and gave it the representation it deserved. Oh, Thanos got hit with 6 explosions? He'll just take them and turn them into a custom flamethrower. Drax and Mantis are charging Thanos. Good thing he can turn them into rocks and ribbons. If anything's about to go south, he can always turn things into bubbles. The full scope of the Infinity Gauntlet is, no pun intended here, on full display. This movie did not pull any punches. What else did I like? Oh, there was the introduction to the Guardians of the Galaxy. As soon as the Rubber Band Man song came on, I just had a giant smile on my face. Oddly enough, that song is both fun and kind of epic for the Guardians. I don't know if James Gunn got to pick that song, or if it was the Russo brothers, but their introduction was perfect and set everything up for their eventual destruction. After the Guardians literally run into Thor, he and Star-Lord have some witty banter. Thor decides to go find a weapon, and Rocket wants to go. Through a misunderstanding, Thor thinks Rocket is the captain of the Guardians, and Rocket rolls with it. However, that's kind of dark in hindsight. This is the last scene where Rocket is with the Guardians before leaving. He doesn't see them at all again. And at the end of the movie, he's the only Guardian left. So, I guess by rank of succession, I guess Rocket is the captain now. And I guess at this point, before I talk about the big guy himself, I can talk about each character I liked a little bit. Like I said before, I thought the Guardians were good. Drax still had his humor intact and worked really well off of the actual Avengers. Mantis had some good lines to help de-stress the audience. Doctor Strange, he was a heavy hitter in this movie. Even though he spent half of it as a prisoner, he still went out on a good note. The sheer level of power he displays against Thanos and how he talks to him is great, and I really was shocked by his death. I mean, in the original comic, Strange lived to the very end. He saw his friends get slaughtered, and even saw Thanos wipe out every god in existence. This man, aside from Adam Warlock, is the only character from the MCU to have lived out the events in the original Infinity Gauntlet comic. Also, my poor girlfriend Becky, Benedict Cumberbatch is her favorite human ever, so once he bit the dust in this movie, she just looks over at me crushed. I think she lost her soul during the movie. But who else was there that I liked? There was Black Panther and Okoye. Side note, the scene where everyone is charging the barrier, but Captain America and Black Panther are like a mile ahead and are the first ones charging the enemy, I found that to be both epic and kind of hilarious. It reminds me of that scene in Return of the King where all of the humans and elves and dwarves, they like stare down Sauron's army, and Aragorn turns around and he's like, "For Frodo," and then he alone charges the army, and like by the time he reaches them, everyone else is like, "Oh yeah, we have weapons too. Charge!" I don't know why, it just made me think of that movie. M'Baku makes a comeback, and Shuri is there too. She says something that leaves Bruce Banner, one of the smartest people in comics, speechless. "Oh, you have this technical problem. Why didn't you do this?" We didn't really think of that yet. I'm sure you tried your best." That line was great. I mentioned Iron Man's story arc, but the character himself is great. I got some Iron Man 3 flashbacks while watching Robert Downey Jr. give a very serious portrayal of the character. He still has the one-liners and the awesome suit, but there's more fear this time. It's been building up since the end of the first Avengers movie, so when Stark realizes that the end game he referenced in Age of Ultron is finally here, he's terrified. He can still make the jokes, but there's a layer of fear and seriousness behind them. Which brings leads me to the last stand he makes. Tony's final fight against Thanos is fantastic. Some people were pissed that it wasn't Captain America who had the one-on-one fight with the Titan, like in the comic, but this makes more sense to me. Iron Man was the one who started the MCU, while Captain America started Marvel Comics. So the heroic last stand makes sense for Steve Rogers in the Gauntlet comic book, while Tony Stark facing down Thanos is more appropriate in the movie. By the way, did anyone else's audience gasp in shock when Stark was impaled? I just remember someone in my theater going, "My baby!" He's almost like 50, but whatever. But anyway, the fight between Stark and Thanos was great. This is what I wanted to see, a hero pushed to his limit but could still give more. Again, it's one of my favorite fights in this entire franchise here. Who else was there? Falcon and War Machine were there. Looking back on it, I'm glad they patched things up since Civil War. In this movie, they're like war buddies and had some good coordination. Scarlet Witch was pretty cool. The entire time in this movie for her was just despair with some deja vu thrown in for good measure. Just like Quicksilver, here's a man she loves and is willing to do anything to protect him, but at the end of the day, unlike her brother, Vision's death was in vain thanks to the Time Stone. During this movie, she keeps convincing herself that there's another way to save Vision. So when the time comes to save the universe, she goes through a lot of pain realizing that there's only one way to go, to kill another person that she loves. I really like the interaction she has with Thanos. The latter completely understands what she's going through, but she's so consumed with rage and sadness that Thanos simply pets her hair and is like, "I get you, don't worry, it will all be over soon." And then she turns to dust. And then finally, we have the actin MVP, Tom Holland as Spider-Man. What do I need to say about him? I'm really glad he was included in the cinematic universe, this movie in particular, and I was very impressed with how he handled himself. He proved himself an Avenger, and he had the best death scene in the movie. I think it's even better than Gamora's death. It's just so tragic because in the last moments of his life, we, the audience, are reminded that, oh yeah, he's just a kid. It hits you right in the soul. Speaking of soul, seeing the Red Skull again was pretty awesome. I don't know if that was Hugo Weaving or not reprising his role, but seeing the first supervillain converse with the last supervillain was something really special and pretty cool to see. So that being said, let's finally talk about Thanos. I loved this portrayal. In the comics, he's basically a purple Darkseid, one of the most powerful beings in existence, but can still be dignified in his approach to rule the universe. However, in this movie, his motivation is a little different. In the comics, Thanos only wanted to wipe out half of all life to please the physical embodiment of death. In this movie, though, he did it because he believes that there has to be balance. The universe, despite its size, doesn't have infinite resources. His own homeworld was destroyed due to its overpopulation, so in his twisted mind, he thinks that by wiping out half of everything, the universe can grow and be peaceful. He even makes that point to Gamora. When he was done with her race, that world turned into a paradise. It's just a shame that billions had to die. The best kinds of villains are the ones that believe that what they're doing is right. Professor Moriarty, he wants to manipulate people because he feels that his superior mind needs to be in charge. Slade Wilson becomes Deathstroke because he's trying to avenge someone he cared about in the show Arrow. Even Ultron believes that what he's doing is right because the world needs to evolve before the next catastrophe, which begs the question if Ultron knew about Thanos. That would be cool if we got an answer for that. But yeah, Thanos works as a villain because while his goal is horrific, we can understand where he's coming from. He's easily the best Marvel movie villain yet. He's not just some evil clone or a guy with a grudge and complicated plan. He is power absolute, and we see him grow and develop. With each stone he gets, he loses something important in return. Thanos, by the end of this movie, has lost his army, his most faithful servants, and even his favorite daughter. In fact, let's talk about Thanos and Gamora. At the end of the day, it was a father trying to win his daughter's approval, his last attempt to convert her before the reckoning begins, but all that changes once they reach the location of the Soul Stone. Sidetrack here. But I also really love the pacing in this movie. Each scene happens at a natural rate, and I don't think any scene dragged on or was too short. For example, once Thanos and Gamora arrive at the Mountain of the Soul Stone, Thanos says, "That stone better be up there." I thought at first that we were going to get a scene of the two of them talking and going over a moot point, that we would then have a pointless action scene as they climb the mountain, but no, the next shot is them at the summit. This film knows what it needs and where to go to achieve those needs. Anyway, the realization Gamora has when she realizes that Thanos actually cares about her is great. She is in disbelief that this monster actually cares for something after she spent a solid minute yelling about how the universe finally dealt a karma blow to her dear old dad. The music, the slow motion, the tears down Thanos' face knowing he has to sacrifice Gamora to save the universe in his demented vision, it all culminates into a truly tragic death. So when the scene arrives when Thanos says to a young Gamora that this journey cost him everything, you believe it. Even Thanos' final line is pure Thanos. When Thor shoves Stormbreaker into Thanos' chest, he says, "You should have aimed for the head." Then, boom, the deaths start happening. I love that realization that we, the audience, are reacting to the deaths just as the heroes are, in disbelief, in shock, in worries about whoever's next to die, and of course in sadness. All at the hands of this purple alien, from his power to his intimidation to his motivation. Thanos easily stands at the top of Marvel's villains. I'm really glad that he got the symbolic treatment he deserved, and that scene at the end, perfect. When he's just sitting there looking up at the sunrise as he told Doctor Strange that's what he'd do, the music dims down and he lets off a faint smile. Roll the credits and then show the title card turn to dust. That was great. So it's really no surprise that I really like this movie. I like the characters, and I especially love what they did to Thanos, despite being a different interpretation of the character. I can't wait to see how part 2 handles the conclusion of the storyline, but now let's talk about the dislikes. As much as I like this movie, there were a couple things in there that I personally didn't like. This doesn't change any praise I gave the movie, but like anything, it's not perfect. So, what didn't I like? I guess for starters, I can talk about the deaths. There were 2 deaths that I didn't really get the point of. I guess it was just all about shock value, but story-wise, in hindsight, I don't know if they were the best idea. The first death was Black Panther, and the reason why I didn't like that was because I guess that the Russo brothers thought that they should make the Wakandans have a life without their king. Their monarchy is literally sacred to them, so what will they do when they realize that, oh, our king is dead? What will Okoye do? What will Shuri do? How will all of Wakanda react? If you want answers to those questions, then watch the Black Panther solo movie, because that exact situation happens in that movie. T'Challa is believed to be dead, so his environment reacts to that cause. There's no shock value or lingering stakes once T'Challa bites it, because we've already seen it happen. I would have preferred it if T'Challa stayed alive, just so he could see firsthand the deaths caused by Thanos. I wanted him to see his people turn to dust, and then see someone close to him die. If it was Okoye or Shuri that died in front of him, I think the impact would have been so much greater. Then we could have 2 kings who are on a quest for justice. Also, these 2 interacting with each other, that would be pretty cool to see. The other death that I didn't really get was Star-Lord. I felt like if he lived, he would have to live up to his role as leader of the Guardians, and he still has mistakes to correct, like killing Thanos chief among them. Even though I did like his character in the movie and the struggle he went through, the ending made me feel like there was more that could be done. Once again, I feel like his death only happened because of the shock value, that we, the audience, wouldn't expect it. There's also a common complaint that Star-Lord screwed the pooch in this movie, and because of it, that suddenly makes his character god-awful. I don't really think that's the case. True, thanks to him losing his cool, half the universe dies, but I kinda get where he's coming from because I've seen the first 2 Guardians of the Galaxy movies. He doesn't have control over his emotions, especially when loved ones are involved. He lost his mother, he killed his father, and lost his daddy. Now he lost the one woman that he truly loved, so mix that with the inability to control his extreme emotions, and you have an understandable meltdown that leads to trouble. So I can see why people have an issue with Quill's character in this movie, but I really don't. I can see why he lost it. Other than the deaths, there were only two aspects of the film that I didn't really like, the first of which was some of the comedy. I'm all for good jokes, and they are needed to help balance the drama happening in this movie. However, humor is subjective, and some jokes for me didn't exactly work. Not because they failed in getting a reaction for the audience, but because the movie thought that some of these jokes are masterpieces, so when they're said, the movie just freezes. Like, it's waiting for the audience to calm down after hearing the greatest joke in their lives. The best example was when Mantis said what the Guardians did, "We take ass and kick names." That line is funny, but then the camera freezes on Mantis and Drax, and then it cuts to Tony and Peter, who are also just standing still. I get that they're reacting to such a ridiculous statement, but from how they're acting in the film, it's like they're on Saturday Night Live waiting for the laughter to die down before they can move on with the script. This could all be forgiven if during that take Robert Downey Jr. made like an extended face, like you could see that the rage and disappointment is taking an effect on him, and he could act through the inevitable laughter, but no, he just stands there. If you want an example of this done well, go watch the part where Star-Lord sees Thanos and he raises his hand to signal his friends to stay put, but instead of doing that, they just walk past him and we see the instant realization of failure on his face. The camera doesn't hold on that and allows the scene to flow naturally. Most of the jokes did work, but there were only a handful where I went, okay. The other dislike that I have is more of a nitpick. I understand that for this monumental movie, they got everyone they could, but some characters felt like they were tacked on there, or were there because the plot and their contracts demanded it. Captain America got some moments, but aside from his last stand with Thanos, there wasn't anything really Captain America-ish about him. Same goes for Black Widow, Black Panther, especially Bucky. He showed up 4 times in this movie. His introduction to get a new metal arm, seeing Steve, talking to him before the battle, and then fighting with Rocket. That last moment was great, but each of these moments are so brief, it makes you wonder if they were saving him for the next movie. I guess not, because he's the first one to turn to dust. In fact, now that I think about it, everyone in the core Avengers group lived. You know, the original 6, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Hulk, Black Widow. I'm just going to bet that Hawkeye lived. I mean, he has a reason to fight now. There's no way that his entire family of 5 survived the gauntlet snap, so I think Hawkeye is getting out of retirement again. Also, War Machine lived, along with Rocket, Nebula, and Ogier. I'm not sure about Shuri if she survived, so I guess she can hop back in the next one if she is still alive, but yeah, screw all the new heroes we just spent time building up. We don't need Black Panther, but we definitely need War Machine. If the Marvel Cinematic Universe was like Smash Brothers, then War Machine is the Falco to Iron Man's Fox. At least Spider-Man's death was tragic and Doctor Strange's death had purpose, but the fact that such an iconic character perished for the shock value, and yet a clone hero lived, seems kind of silly. Wouldn't it have been great if Tony came home to realize that not only did this kid who looked to him as a mentor die, but also his best friend? If Pepper bit it too, that gives Tony even more reason to live up to this line he said in the Avengers.
You're missing the point. There's no throne. There is no version of this where you come out on top. Maybe your army comes, and maybe it's too much for us, but it's all on you. Because if we can't protect the Earth, you can be damn well sure we'll avenge it.
But anyway, aside from a couple deaths and a few jokes, that's really it for the dislikes. Like I said, it doesn't change how I felt about the movie, but it still has flaws. Anyway, now to the final section, which I'm going to call the Trevor Cut. This section is dedicated to what I would change in the movie that would make it better for me. And I won't be focusing on the dislikes since that would just be a moot point here. I just want to talk about anything that might have made the experience better for me. For instance, the ending where Thanos sits on on the porch watching the sunrise. What I kind of wanted to happen is that while he watched, he used the reality stone one more time to conjure up the knife he gave to Gamora. He would then place it on his finger again and notice that the knife was perfectly balanced. This could be symbolic to show that he finally accomplished his goal and could be one last tribute to the one thing he actually cared about. I also wanted to see more of the beginning. Specifically, I wanted to see Thor's new lightning power go up against everyone, including the Black Order. Thanos, I can get not being affected by it, but it would be cool to see the Black Order be effective in their job if they took down Thor on their own. Like seeing the big brute alien take a lightning blast, but then Maul takes some metal and covers Thor's hand so he can't use lightning anymore, and then it's followed by Corvus Glaive and Midnight launching a double strike that Thor can't really defend against. I'm glad we got the Black Order fleshed out a little bit as the film went, but I wish we got that extra dosage of them in the beginning to really show how menacing they are. Speaking of Maul, I kind of wish his death was a little more hard fought. He's ultimately defeated because Spider-Man came up with a movie reference and kind of went out like a punk. If there was just a little scuffle followed by a launch into space, I could look past his death. I wish we saw more Vision actually be in Vision. I think the writers wanted to nerf him because he is pretty powerful on his own, but I think getting that first wound really limited Vision to going all out against Corvus. Vision got the last laugh, but I wish he was able to fight back more, being that he's literally the last piece of the puzzle for Thanos. Finally, I kind of wish we saw more side characters go through the effects of the gauntlet snap. How cool would it have been if we saw half of the main cast for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. just disintegrate while Coulson watches in horror? Or how about seeing Hank Pym die right before Jan from Ant-Man? And if you really wanted to go all out, transition to Iron Fist turn into dust with the message reading, "I hope you forgive us now, sincerely, Marvel." Maybe we'll see something along those lines in part 2, but I think they might have been best used here. So that's all the personal changes I can think of, and I can't really think of anything else to say. This movie was very satisfying to see, and I personally think it lived up to the hype. Now, this opinion can change depending on how part 2 handles all of this. I have high hopes, but I'm not making my opinion of this film concrete until I actually see how part 2 handles this. But for the first half of this event, I really enjoyed my time watching this. It's unlike any Marvel movie before. It had consequences, and it was just a blast to see. That's it for this episode of Alon 1. If there's anything you want me to talk about in any future episodes, let me know, and I'll see what I can do. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see all of you legends next time. Have a good one.